I knew I was unsatisfactory as far back as I could remember. I don't think my parents ever actually said it. That wasn't necessary. I knew everything I needed to know from the way they gazed at me both when I was born, hoping for their first son, and again when my sister Kate arrived 3 years later. I was their firstborn daughter, Maya, and I felt inadequate. I overheard Mom saying to Dad, maybe the next one will be a boy, shortly after Rebecca was born. However, there would not be a subsequent one. Mother was unable to conceive again due to complications encountered during the delivery of Kate. Their hopes of one day welcoming grandsons from their daughters had to be shelved for the time being. Even though we lived in a little suburban house, I remember how fast Kate learned to control our parents. Whenever she blinked, her large brown eyes would disappear like ice cream on a hot summer day. I learned to depend on myself instead of chasing after attention that would never come my way, and I became more self-reliant as a result. Kate was a master manipulator. She knew just what to do to achieve her goals. Even though I had enough to eat, a safe place to live, and an education, I was never really warm and fuzzy inside. I came to terms with it and eventually fortified my inner defenses so that I could fend for myself. During my final year of high school, I declared over dinner that I was going to major in economics. From across the table, Mom and Dad exchanged glances. "Are you sure, honey?" As she hesitated to put the fork to her mouth, Mom inquired, "That's such a technical field." Dad gave a knowing nod. "What about something more suitable for a young lady? Teaching, maybe, or nursing?" I refused to budge. Acceptance to State University has already been extended to me. A partial scholarship would be appropriate given my academic performance. "Well," Mom moaned, "I guess it's up to you." Her voice's disapproval had grown so familiar by this time that it was almost reassuring. From her seat across the table, high school student Kate grinned. She told our parents, "I'm thinking of studying psychology," and their faces lit up. "That's wonderful, sweetheart." "Mom," she gloated, "you've always been so good with people." As I stirred my peas around the plate, I allowed the sound of their words to envelop me like gentle murmurs. The futility of trying to win their approval was something I'd realized a long time ago. Rather, I looked ahead, anticipating the freedom that college would offer. While I was a sophomore at State University, I met James. We happened to run into each other at the library's finance section. He was a senior studying economics. We met when he picked up my statistics textbook after I dropped it. While returning my book to me, he inquired, "Are you enrolled in Professor Martinez's macro class? Aren't you? I've seen you asking all the smart questions." Not used to people taking notice of me in a good way, I turned red. "Yeah, that's me. The annoying one who keeps the class running late." "Very little bother," he said with a smile. "To be more specific, I was hoping we could get coffee together sometime. I could fill you in on the specifics of the advanced classes you'll be attending in the coming year." After going out for coffee, we ended up having supper, which led to movie nights, and eventually we became inseparable. I had never before experienced being so noticed and valued. James truly liked me without making any comparisons. He accepted me just as I was. James got a job with Anderson Consulting once he graduated, and I was able to finish school. We decided to move in together the moment I graduated. After he patiently waited for me, we were able to secure a modest apartment downtown. It lacked charm, but was ours. While visiting my parents for the first time, I introduced him as James and introduced each of my parents. Their attitude took a dramatic and unexpected turn. "Oh, James." There was a near squeal from Mom. "It is with much pleasure that we now greet you. Are you planning to spend Thanksgiving with us? Is it Christmas?" "The two." Dad gave him a shoulder tap. "Everyone has been talking about you, son. Your job description is here. Maya asserts that you work in the financial sector." Son piqued my interest. Even if it was via marriage, they were finally receiving the boy they had always desired. As I observed, They were completely enamored with James, inquiring about his future goals and when he would be ready to settle down. Sitting in the corner at these family gatherings, Kate, who was still living at home after graduating and hadn't found a steady boyfriend, looked at us with a piercing gaze. I got to be the sister who wanted something bad enough that she couldn't resist it for a change. James quietly proposed after a home supper after they had been living together for a year. In spite of my parents' desires for a grandiose ceremony, I promptly said yes, and we settled on a modest, private ceremony. "It's the day you've been waiting for," Mom disagreed. "Don't you want something more special?" "This is special," I echoed with conviction. "It's exactly what we want." With only immediate relatives and close friends present, the intimate garden ceremony was picture perfect. After our wedding ceremony, James and I returned to our apartment as husband and wife after celebrating with a beautiful dinner reception. We started our married life at the same place we had started our life together, and it seemed perfect. Not long after the honeymoon ended, people began asking questions. "So, when can we expect some good news?" With her scarcely veiled desire for a grandson, Mom would inquire. I would mention, "We're saving for a house first," multiple times. "We want to be financially stable before starting a family." Then Dad would scowl disapprovingly. "Your mother and I didn't have much when we started out, and we managed just fine." There was a constant stream of news about friends expanding families at every family dinner. "Has it reached you?" "Another boy," the Hendersons exclaimed as they became grandparents once again. Alternatively, "The Smith's daughter just announced she's pregnant, and she's younger than you, Maya." James and I saved for 2 years before we were able to buy our first home. It wasn't flashy, but it belonged to us. And the bank, I suppose. I anticipated a flurry of queries about the baby the second we signed the mortgage paperwork. It was done. I was caught off guard when Kate made her announcement 3 months later. As she placed her palm on her still flat stomach, she announced, "I'm pregnant," at Sunday supper. "It's Mark's." We were all unimpressed with Mark, her 6-month lover. Life zoomed by in the months that followed. Mark up and left as soon as Kate began to show, returning to live with our parents and leaving her alone. Instead, than viewing their impending grandchild as a cause for scandal or shame, my parents turned their house into a shrine. You would have thought little Emily was born a princess. They essentially turned their lives upside down to help raise their granddaughter, transforming Kate's former room into a nursery and buying every baby thing imaginable. "Isn't she perfect?" Whenever we visited, Mom would rock Emily while cooing. "Don't you just want one of your own, Maya?" Watching James with Emily was the most painful thing, far worse than my parents' relentless pressure. For hours he would play on the floor with her, making ridiculous expressions and occupying her with books and plush animals. "James is such a natural with children," Mom would say with a hint of malice. "He's going to make such a wonderful father." Everything that the pregnancy websites suggested, including keeping track of my period and taking vitamins, I began to do. Nothing changed no matter how many months we tried. James, meantime, began to spend an increasing amount of time at my parents' house, where he played with Emily. He would remark, "She's such a sweet kid," as we drove home. "Have you noticed her newfound ability to walk? Uncle," was almost her word today. Every time he was good with her, my mom would tell him good things. "Just imagine how wonderful you'll be with your own children." I would nod and smile, but a knot of unease was tightening inside of me. Why hadn't I conceived by now? Imagine if there was a problem. However, I ignored these concerns, assuring myself that all will work out in due course. I persisted in maintaining an optimistic outlook despite my year-long futile attempts. Telling myself, "These things take time," was my strategy. But Mom flew into a panic attack the moment she learned we had been trying for a year. "Maya, a whole year. There's a problem. You should visit a doctor without delay." Before I had even left their house that day, she began sending me the contact details of fertility doctors. At long last, I scheduled an appointment to stop getting everyone's goat. James accompanied me into the sterile examination room and held my hand as the doctor went over her questions. More testing, including blood work and ultrasounds, came next. The results day subsequently arrived. The results show that you're infertile, the doctor stated kindly, but I'm sorry. Like a punch in the stomach, the words landed on me. I hardly felt James's squeeze when he took hold of my hand. Even though she seemed to be speaking from a great distance, the doctor persisted in discussing potential treatments and alternatives. James and I ate almost none of our takeout that night as we sat in the kitchen. We can consider options like adoption or in vitro fertilization, he ultimately stated. There are options. The destruction felt final, but I nodded indifferently. What would I say to my loved ones when I told them this? During the subsequent family meal, the solution emerged. It was like pulling off a Band-Aid. I wanted to get it done quickly. I interrupted my parents in the middle of a conversation to say, "Mom, Dad, I need to tell you something." A professional examined me, and I inhaled deeply. My infertility is terminal. I have no ability to conceive. Following this, there was an ear-piercing quiet. After then, Mom's face twisted in contempt. She spit out the word infertile, like if it were poison. What kind of woman can't even do the one thing she's meant to do? My dad would stare right past me. An empty vessel, he murmured lightly. Just an empty flower. As she bounced Emily on her knee, Kate sat there grinning. Well, I guess we know who the real woman in the family is. I turned to James for comfort, but he remained motionless, fixated on his food. In that instant, the tears welled up in an uncontrollable torrent. I ignored their cries as I bolted out of the house, pushing away from the table. It was just too much for me to handle after that night to return to their place. However, James persisted, attending to Emily, conversing with Kate, and paying attention to my parents. Replete with tales, he would return home. He would mention that Emily had learned a new song that day. You should have seen her dancing around the living room. This lasagna that Kate made is just mouth-watering. She's becoming quite skilled in the kitchen. Word for word, it sliced into my soul. James's regular breathing kept me up at night, and I wondered whether he was mad at me because I couldn't have children. Every time he returned from another visit to my parents' place with that longing expression on his face after playing with Emily, the guilt gnawed at me even more. On an ordinary Tuesday, everything in my world came crashing down. James loves Chinese takeout, so I brought him some when I got off work early. The home, however, was dim and deserted. It wasn't out of the ordinary that his car wasn't in the driveway, but something seemed wrong. I dialed his number. There is no response. Got a call back. No stopping there. Suddenly, an Instagram notification sounded on my phone. A new photo was posted by Kate Thompson. Her posts normally go unnoticed by me, but this one caught my attention. The picture of James on my parents' couch, with Emily curled up in his lap and Kate leaning against him, smiling for the camera, made my stomach turn. A moment spent with my beloved loved ones, as stated in the caption. I frantically reached for my vehicle keys, my grip trembling. The logical side of my brain attempted to justify the situation by suggesting that it might be benign, but my intuition was correct. On the way to my parents' house, my thoughts wandered to every interaction between James and Kate in the past year, painting a fresh and horrifying picture of them. Multiple vehicles filled their driveway. Mom's automobile, Dad's truck, and James's sedan. Like clockwork, the front door swung open. I sneaked inside, my heart racing so fast I felt it may explode. A rustle of voices escaped the living room. "James, you are already considered a son by us, my mom was telling me, and you deserve to be happy." My dad said, "You've been so great with Emily, and Kate, she's young and fertile, you know. You two could expand your family. Consider it, my mom said. Why stay trapped in a marriage with? The revulsion in her voice was audible even after she suppressed it. A barren woman. A gasp escaped my lips. This is not possible. I sprang into the room, startling everyone. James sat in Dad's armchair as my sister and I sat on the couch, and Emily played with blocks on the floor in the middle, creating an eerie atmosphere reminiscent of a nightmare. A big, joyful family, and they're all trying to leave me out. What the hell is going on here? It sounded louder than I felt. My parents were stubborn, but James at least seemed embarrassed. Maya, Mom said, tall and proud, we're just having an honest discussion about what's best for everyone. Best for everyone? My voice quivering, I echoed. You're trying to convince my husband to leave me for my sister. According to Dad, someone needs to consider his future. He deserves what he wants, but you can't give it to him. Kate can. As I waited for James to defend our marriage and tell them they were insane, I looked to him. He kept staring at the floor instead. James, I whispered, barely audible as I called him. In a low voice, he apologized to Maya. However, they are correct. I desire procreation, a household, during which time I began to care about Kate. As she extended her hand to place it on James's arm, Kate couldn't help but grin. She responded, "Get out," with an air of coldness. You are no longer welcome here. These people are become my family. I studied every expression on their faces. My dad's serious disapproval, my mom's icy satisfaction, Kate's victorious grin, and James's shameful evasion. Nothing has come out of our 4 years of marriage or our lifetime of familial bonds. Silently, I pivoted and made my way out. I drove home in a trance, forgot to pack my luggage, and left James a note, "File for divorce. Your lawyer will be contacted by my lawyer." Rapid and clinical was the divorce process. We divided everything in half. I moved into a little apartment across town and dove headfirst into my work in an effort to escape. But that wasn't how social media worked. A coworker of mine gasped at her phone during coffee break one morning. "Oh my goodness, Maya," I apologized. She stumbled over her words. "I forgot to unfollow your sister." Kate in a floor-length white gown, James in a tux, and my parents grinning by their side were all on display, even though she attempted to cover her screen. "It's fine," I lied and said, genuinely believing it wasn't. "I hope they're very happy together." Another notification surfaced a year later. Meet little Rose. They finally got the girl they had always dreamed of thanks to my replacement. With Emily, the adoptive child, and his new kid from his relationship with Kate, James finally had the ideal little family. That day, I removed every single one of my social media accounts. However, life has a curious knack for catching you off guard. On a Saturday, I was out grocery shopping when my cart was involved in a collision with another customer's. I apologized deeply, a low-pitched voice said. My gaze met the warmest brown eyes I had ever laid eyes on. "I'm Michael." He introduced himself as he helped me gather my strewn belongings. "Can I buy you coffee to apologize for being a klutz?" After just one coffee, our supper had evolved into a dating relationship, and before I knew it, I was falling head over heels again. On the other hand, I started out being forthright this time. "I finally broke the news to you 6 months into our relationship over dinner. My infertility is terminal. I am unable to form a family." Michael firmly grasped both of my hands. "My heart aches for you, Maya. We will adopt a child or choose not to have children in the future. All I want is you." Our courthouse wedding was intimate, with only our closest friends and family present. Stay away from the conflict in the family and ditch that pricey clothing. Loving is all. My peculiar symptoms, such as morning nausea and vertigo at inconvenient times, began a year into our marriage. Michael pushed for my medical evaluation. "Mrs. Chen," the doctor explained as he examined my test findings, "congratulations, you're pregnant." Before her, I gazed. It's not feasible. The test results came back negative. I can provide evidence from my tests. She softly grinned. There are moments when the human body seems enigmatic. Even when infertility is officially diagnosed, pregnancy can still happen. It's not often, but it does occur. On that fateful night, Michael and I sobbed together in a mix of delight, disbelief, and optimism. My family was kept in the dark. They were no longer entitled to partake in my joy. 9 months down the road, I finally got to hold my gorgeous, perfect baby boy, a 7-pound, 6-ounce bundle of joy. Together with Michael, I gave him the name Alexander, meaning defender of mankind. Seeing his little face filled me with nothing but unconditional love. I felt zero remorse, fury, or resentment. A lovely rhythm has settled into life. I had all I needed. Alexander, who was 2 years old, and Michael, who was the ideal father. We often enjoyed cozy home-cooked meals more than going out to restaurants, but that night we celebrated Michael's promotion at Lamb's Zone, a chic French spot in the city center. At that moment, I beheld them. For a while, I felt like I was dreaming. However, that was not the case. My sister Kate was seen in a passionate hug with a man who was surely not James. They were concealed at a booth on the corner, but not sufficiently so. Ignoring everything else, she ran her fingers through his hair and kissed him passionately. I retrieved my phone and secretly snapped a few shots, my palm quivering with nerves. The images were still legible despite the low light. Everyone could see that something was happening. "Maya," my arm was touched by Michael. "Are you all right? You seem so pale now." I handed him the pictures. That's Kate with someone who isn't her husband. Michael's jaw clenched. His knowledge of our past included the actions of Kate and James toward me. "Are you going to send those to him?" For a moment, I considered pressing the send button. Doing it would be a breeze. Just like they destroyed my ideal family, I could destroy theirs with the press of a button. But no, finally I suggested putting the images in a safe place. I'm better than them. 1 year elapsed. My obstinate chin and Michael's sympathetic gaze were shaping Alexander into a handsome, talented young man. We decided to take advantage of the great weather by strolling to a local park while visiting a buddy who lived in my former neighborhood, which was something I rarely did. It occurred at that moment. For some reason, just as we were about to turn the corner by the neighborhood grocery store, we saw Mom, Dad, Kate, and James loading up their car with groceries. They noticed us just when we noticed them. Their first move was to act as if we were complete strangers by turning aside and sticking our heads out. Alexander, who was cradling my hand while babbling on about the toy truck he had brought to play at the park, became the center of attention. With that, Mom halted. Who is this?" Or I could have chosen to disregard them. Probably should have. However, I was halted by an object. As I spoke calmly and steadily, I introduced my kid, Alexander. Kate chuckled harshly. "Oh, I'm sorry. Everyone is aware that you are sterile. From what agency did you choose to adopt him?" Indulging in the moment, I met her gaze directly. "He was born 3 years ago to me. We did not work with an adoption agency." "That's just not possible," Mom blurted out. After she started to say, "The doctors were wrong," I interrupted her. "This is a common occurrence." "Uncommon, however, it does occur, and the evidence is this." Alexander was looking on with interest as the strangers passed by, so I signaled to him. Dad's expression changed. "A grandson. We have a grandson." As they approached us, Mom extended her arms as if she had every right to hold my child. In a protective move, I moved to stand in front of Alexander. Hardly saying no, I responded, "You are not authorized to do this. You have no right to treat me like trash and then claim my grandson. Because of your treachery, you no longer enjoy that luxury." Watching our parents fix it on my son caused Kate's face to flush in an unattractive shade of scarlet. After I was discarded, She had always been the favorite, and she hated it when things changed. "Oh, Maya, stop being such a brat," she spat out. "Wow, you managed to conceive a single child. Not a huge deal. I was ultimately victorious. I found your spouse. My 2 lovely girls gave him a true family. And still better than you can ever be, just admit that." She hadn't even finished her tirade before I reached for my phone. "Speaking of family, Kate, why don't you tell everyone about your extracurricular activities?" "What are you talking about?" As James's pupils contracted, he inquired. Presenting my phone, I retrieved the images taken at the eatery. "Look at your devoted wife enjoying supper with another man. I must admit, Kate, that the majority of diners do not consume the faces of those with whom they dine." As soon as James grabbed the phone from my hand, Kate's face lost all color. Their jaws dropped open in disbelief as they hurried to get a better look. "Who is he?" His voice quivering with anger, James made a demand. Kate froze. He's just a friend from work." "Friends don't kiss like that," I saw with a level head. "And they certainly don't meet in dark corners of expensive restaurants while their spouses are at home with the kids." "Kate, how could you?" My mom let out a gasp. "After everything." "Everything." It made me laugh out loud. "After you aided her in abducting my husband, following your decision to discard me on the grounds that I was incapable of bearing children. What a fascinating concept. Isn't karma?" The parking lot was now the scene of James and Kate's yelling match. As I took Alexander's hand, I whispered, "Come on, sweetie. Time to go home." As we strolled away from the nuclear explosion, my son happily chattered about the park we were going to, oblivious to the mayhem around them. I didn't find out the final details until a month later, when word got around the neighborhood. James had himself checked since he was suspicious after learning about Kate's infidelity. He had been sterile the whole time, it turned out, which meant that his purported daughter, Rose, couldn't be his. He abruptly abandoned her after deciding he would not provide financial support to Rose or Emily. Despite the disarray in her once idyllic existence, Kate returned to live with our parents. After that, they came up with every imaginable way to get in touch with me. Calls, emails, and even an unannounced visit to our house. "Please, Maya," Mom pleaded with Maya as she walked out the door. "An awful error was committed by us. Join us in being a part of Alexander's story. He's the only grandchild we have." "You should have thought about that before you called me an empty vessel," I said without a fuss. "Actions have consequences." Michael wholeheartedly agreed with my choice. While we were watching Alexander play with his blocks one night, he observed, "Family isn't about DNA. Loyalty, respect, and love are at the heart of everything. Nothing about those things was shown to you." Obviously, he was correct. By the time I looked about at my tiny family, which included my amazing husband who loved me no matter what, my miraculous son who disproved the doctors, and our home full of joy and laughter, I realized I had everything I needed. There are instances when the family into which you are born does not necessarily represent your destiny. You gotta make your own path with the ones who will choose you back every now and then. Michael was my choice, and I was his. From the moment he blinked, spoke, or took his first steps, Alexander returned the favor. That is the essence of true family, and I really wouldn't change a thing.